They tell you, you're making 150 gallons per day,
Right.
but
How
you're
much?
wasting how much? But you're wasting 600 gallons.
Right.
So because at the end of the day, our hobby is about conserving nature, and
Sure.
you can't have that and destroy it at the same time.
Mhm.
It's like that.
Yeah.
It's an oxymoron
Work
that
it.
I don't want to
Right.
deal with.
Yeah. No doubt.
Exactly. Most of us that have been in the hobby for a long time, we have an RODI unit. Let's have a show about tips and things that we can do to our RODI unit to make it better,
Yeah.
more efficient. So Dave, let's go over what an RODI unit is to begin with. What does it do?
Basically, it's a filtration method of filtering all the impurities out of our city utility water system. In the simplest terms, there's a lot of impurities, especially depending where you're located and the municipality, utility company, a water company that you use. A lot of these you can actually go to they'll have a website, or they have to disclose, do their own water testing, and you can actually see some of the impurities that are in the water that you're getting into your home. So there's metals a lot of time in the water. So you can imagine adding this into your aquarium and the evaporation, and over time you now you got a toxic aquarium basically with heavy metals in there. So this filtration method is really the best thing that you can do to have success with your water. You can have the best salt and all the great parameters you want, but if that water going into your aquariums full of impurities, you're going to have problems.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you're cooking with canola oil or you're
Mhm.
cooking with olive oil. It
Right.
doesn't matter what ingredients you use after that base. That the very, very root of everything has to be good quality. Otherwise, anything above it,
Yeah.
it's not going to make a difference. I think one of the biggest things that makes somebody go and get an RODI unit is an algae problem, because it's one of the easiest ways to cut down the root of the problem, which is, like you said, phosphates and silicates in the water, which are quite normal on city water. And really, you can drink that water most of the times without any problems. But when you have a fish tank, when you have, waste from the fish, you have a source of light, it's the perfect condition for algae if you feed the algae.
Right.
So stripping that phosphate, stripping that iron, the excess iron, stripping the silicates out, it just allows you to get that upper hand so the algae doesn't take off and you don't have a unsightly problem. So I think the RODI water units and they're not for aquarium only. I mean, I know that RO is a great way to filter for potable water that you can drink.
Yeah. And what, you just bypass the DI resin for drinking water.
Exactly. The only problem, the big problem with RODI water, and I'm sorry, the RODI unit, is the inefficiency. I mean, we're talking about, 1 to 4, what we call, and one meaning 1 gallon of usable filter water, and then there's 4 gallons of wastewater that go out of it. So for every 1 gallon that you produce of usable water, you're wasting 4 gallons. And that becomes kind of wasteful, not only for the environment. If you live in a city where they are, you have water issues, where there's not enough water, that becomes wasteful. And if you live in a city where you have to pay for the water, which most of us do, then it can add up pretty quickly. And all of a sudden, you're running this RDI unit, you're happy because your tank is doing better, and 6 months later you get a bill from the city, and is
You're like,
because
what?
you've been using. Yeah, because the city
Mhm.
doesn't, most cities don't bill you on a monthly basis. They bill you quarterly, or 6 months.
Mhm.
And the city's going to stick you with the bill. They're not going to go and say, oh yeah, you know what, we'll let you, yeah, yeah, just don't do it again, we'll write it off.
Don't work that way.
You're stuck with that.
Right.
Oh
I
man.
think about
So yeah.
all of these states out west, Carlos, that really have
Mm,
issues with their water supply, and they have to conserve. They can't water their lawns at certain times. You can imagine then you want an aquarium and you're thinking about how much water you're wasting with
mm.
this inefficiency and the cost and just the impact to the system. Everybody needs water. So, maybe think about your neighbors as well. You got a big reef
Yeah.
tank and you consume and you waste a lot of waste.
Not only that, also, to some extent, obviously not at the great extent, but running an RODI unit with a booster pump and everything does use electricity.
Yeah.
And the electricity, especially if it's not coming from a renewable source, you're producing this filter water, but you're wasting electricity as well. So, it's today, I'm sorry, it's like the dollar's not going as much as it used to. So
Mhm.
you have to figure out ways to make things more efficient, so that, I can use the money for my enjoyment and not somebody else's.
Right. We're talking about the inefficiencies of it, but it's such a great tool because I go into retail stores, we visit, and I see so many people carrying jugs,
Mm.
and toting water, and all of that kind of adds into the impact of it's your time, it's gas, it's getting to the store, and
Absolutely.
you know what I mean. It's like all of this adds into the inefficiency, um, but it's also a vital tool, in my opinion, to having a successful aquarium. You got to start, like
I
you
would,
said, with the ingredient, and that's clean
I
water.
would, I would venture to say that you can't, you cannot have a successful tank without filtered water. Whether you get the water from the store, or you buy the RODI unit and you produce your own water, I think the fact of the matter is, without filtered water, you're not going to have a successful tank. You're
Right.
always going to be battling some kind of nuisance algae, or something in there.
Hmm.
And, I agree with you. By the time you add up, getting in the car, turning it on, the emissions, the gas, going there, your time also, and you have to go during the store hours, which are, they're oftentimes they're, they're not open early enough, or they're open only on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So by the time you get going, you're better off with the RODI. I don't remember. I don't know about you, Dave, but I think when I started back in the hobby in the late 90s, I think it was 6 months that I went buying water from a store. And then at that point, I'm like,
Yeah.
screw this.
Yeah.
I'm getting the RODI unit.
Yeah.
And I got a nice RODI unit back then from a company that is no longer in business. But it didn't take me that long to figure that one out. How about you?
Yeah. I mean, my reasoning was using tap water and thinking I could get by without having RODI water. And, for everything you said, I started battling hair algae and just like, what is going on? Then went the route of toting, used gas cans at the time, to the plastic ones, and filling those up and toting them around. And I said, all right, it's time to just bite the bullet and make the investment into getting my own.
By the time you're done with fighting the hair algae, you have now you have hair algae. You're buying chemicals. You're putting that in your tank. You're getting frustrated. You're getting angry, and
Yeah.
sometimes to the point where you're like, you know what? I don't need this in my life. I thought
Yeah.
this was supposed to be fun. What am I
Right.
doing this? It's like you would have been better off just buying the RODI unit.
Absolutely. It makes life easy. And I know it's like, it's like, oh, it's just one more thing I gotta buy, and I gotta figure out where to put this thing, to run the lines, where am I gonna store the water? So it does come with that trade-off. You do have to make the water and store it. Um,
Yeah.
I, I mean, we've all been down that. We've got big mixing vats, and then have the clean water vat next to it with RO water in it and ready to go. So
Yeah.
it's all space that takes up. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's a worthwhile investment.
I remember when I was starting and I was renting, and we had a um, two bathrooms. And I remember we didn't have any space,
Mm.
so I stuck the water container with the RODI unit on the second bathroom in the tub, because it was a tub, and
Yeah.
we never used it for anything else. So
Hmm.
that was what it was, and that's where I put it. I look back and I'm like, oh my
Man,
god,
come a
it's
long
like
way.
all the dates that I brought over is like, oh my god, this guy, what the hell is this guy doing? I'm out of here. And
What kind of
it's
crazy,
like, yeah, what kind of
crazy?
crazy am I getting into? I'm cutting loose right now. I'm out of here right now. I don't blame him too, because I would have looked at all the shit that I had there and I was like, oh hell no. Oh god, but that's a different conversation for another show. All right. So let's talk about things that we can do to optimize and reduce the wastewater. All right.
Yeah,
And the main thing that I can think that we talked about this before the show was it's that second RO membrane.
yeah,
Just adding that second RO membrane, it's going to make a huge difference
yeah.
because it technically grabs the waste from the first membrane and it runs it through a
It's true.
second membrane to squeeze more water, more clear water, clean water out of that.
Yeah,
And then the waste goes. So the waste is, you could argue that it's twice as concentrated. I know that's right, but it's twice as concentrated. They're squeezing more clean water out of the same volume,
hmm.
you know? And I
And
think
what
that's, go ahead.
and I, what are you looking at then in terms of efficiency? Is that a pretty
I
good
mean,
number, 2 to 1, or
yeah, I mean, you can go during optimal conditions, and let's go over optimal conditions.
yeah?
Optimal conditions, the water has to be, you know, somewhere in the 70s, and you have to have the correct pressure
Hmm.
above 60 psi. So if you have water over, in the 70s and the psi is above 60, it could go as high as 2 to 1. That means for every 2 gallons of clean water, you're only wasting one.
Mm.
And compared to 1 to 4, which is 1 gallon of
One to
clean water
four,
to 4 gallons of waste. So that's a huge
huge,
jump in efficiency.
right? Man, that's incredible, the amount of efficiency you get just with that one add-on. Now,
Yeah.
no
The
booster pump with that, Carlos. That can be done just with a regular system.
in this case, you do need the proper psi. So
Okay.
if your city water happens to be above 60 psi, then you should be okay. But if it's less than that, then you definitely need a booster pump, because now the water's going through two filters. So you have to have that strength, that
Yeah.
push to kind of literally, you're shoving water, you're squeezing it through the filter. And then on the other end, you're coming out with clean water and all the wastewater from that.
Hmm.
So you need that pressure.
Yeah.
Another thing that you should know, that you should take into consideration, is that you have to make sure that both membranes have the same capacity. So if you're not sure, just unscrew the cap from the first membrane, take it out, and read the membrane. Usually, it says on the membrane, it says what the gallons per day are, and when you purchase that second membrane, you make sure that it is the same. That's what you do.
So, for instance, you
Another.
don't want a 75 and 100 on the other. You
Mm-mm.
want two
You
75s.
you want 275s,
Yep.
because it's all based on the restrictor too.
Okay.
So, that's what you want to do. Now, if you want to upgrade your unit, let's say you're on a 75 and then I want to hey, I got this. The only difference between a 75 membrane and a 100 membrane is a few dollars, so might as well just get the 100. And you have to get then you have to upgrade the flow restrictor,
Mhm.
because the flow restrictor is optimized for that particular gallons per day. So it's not as easy as just switching the membranes. You also have to get the correct flow restrictor. Otherwise, no matter what you purchase, you're only going to produce what the flow restrictor allows. Make sure that if you're upgrading the capacity of the actual membranes, that
Yeah.
you do find the matching flow restrictor for them, for that particular membrane. Okay, what about, we talked about booster pump.
Yeah.
This is another way to optimize the RODI unit. And that's another way that will work and make your unit far more efficient. And even if you don't decide to add the second membrane, if you add a booster pump, it's huge.
Yeah.
We have a kit that you can install on your RODI unit, whether you purchase it from us or whether you purchase it from another brand. But if you want to make that RODI unit far more efficient as well, you can install this booster pump kit,
Yeah.
and it makes a huge difference, right, Dave?
It's a massive difference. And I think about a lot of these municipalities now that or water companies, they're putting these restrictors on to limit the pressure. You may notice it at the end of some of your hose bibs, or even some of them are putting them on the actual meter. So they're trying to
Mm-hmm.
regulate their pressures with the water pressure that's coming into our homes. And
Mm-hmm.
some of them may be 40 psi or less. And you're talking about it's really inefficient trying to run an RODI with anything less than 50 psi, in my
Yes.
opinion. So
Yeah,
that's something to keep in mind. And if that's the case for you, you definitely going to need a booster pump.
absolutely. Another way to optimize the use of the RODI unit is to recycle the wastewater.
To have a reservoir holding the wastewater, and then maybe you want to use it for gardening or anything really that needs
You know, it's
water.
the same thing as collecting rainwater.
Yeah.
A lot of people are starting to do that a lot, especially if you live in a city where water's really expensive, or if you live in a city where water is becoming there's a big demand for water, and the city can't keep up. Collecting rainwater is actually a really good way of doing it.
Yeah. And I
So
mean,
you could use
you
it.
got the output, the line output, this RO line. It's pretty small. That allows you the
Mhm.
flexibility of really trying to run that line, that drain waste line, to a storage container to hold
Mhm.
this wastewater that
Yep.
could be beneficial for something else for you.
I always tell people, also your fish tank, it doesn't apply for salt water, but it
Mhm.
applies for fresh water. When you do a water change on your fish tank, don't just throw away that water. I mean, if you have a freshwater tank, that water is gold for plants.
Plants, yeah.
If you haven't thought about it, I mean, most people probably have, maybe, but if you're listening to this podcast and you happen to have a freshwater tank, and when you're doing water changes every week, you just throw the water down the drain or you flush it down the toilet, it's like, just grab some of that water and
Yeah.
put it on your plants, and in about a month, come back and talk to me. Your
I can
plants
find
will go on.
there's people out there that are bottling that stuff and selling it as
Yeah,
fertilizer.
as fertile, because it is just full of phosphates, full of nitrates, the stuff that the plants want and
Yeah.
love. And trust me, it is insane how much plants will grow, flowers will bloom just by giving them fish water,
Yeah.
not salt water. Let me make that
Right.
clear.
Yeah.
Not salt water,
Right.
but fresh water.
Yeah.
But again, a little tangent in there from, trying to be recycle the wastewater, because, changing water is, that water that you're changing is wastewater as well.
Yeah.
you know Another thing that will make your RODI very efficient is making sure the filters and the pre-filters are, well maintained,
Mhm.
meaning that don't wait 2 years or, a year to change the pre-filters. you have to keep up with them, and
Especially
I know
that initial pre-filter, Carlos, that first one.
yes,
Man, if you should see how nasty that thing gets. So especially if you don't
yeah,
have clear canisters on your unit on your RODI
mm,
unit, some don't. You really got to
hmm,
watch that because depending on how dirty your water is coming in, that thing could be out in no time, meaning no
yeah,
capacity to filter it.
and I have, it's very easy to tell when the DI resin is wasted because it changes color.
Hmm.
We can see that it usually often goes from blue to an orange.
Yeah.
That's the most
Yep.
common color change out there. So you can tell when that waste, when the DI resin is, which is the filter after the arrow membrane, is wasted. But oftentimes it's very difficult to eye when the pre-filters, the carbon and the sediment are wasted. It's just sometimes it's not that clear to tell. So at that point, we recommend a cheap TDS meter.
Yep.
And most TDS meter are dual, which means they have two probes in there to measure. So you can put a TDS meter after the DI, and then you can put a TDS meter between your pre-filter or in the arrow membrane. And that will tell you right then and there when you need to change those two pre-filters. Changing the two pre-filters also, Dave, I know this is that confirm this for me, but it'll also help you extend the life of the membrane, the arrow membrane itself.
Absolutely. I mean, I like to look at the incoming TDS on my water source because I've noticed like during the summer months in my area, I would be over 500 on that incoming. I knew then at over 500, I was going to exhaust these filters faster. And that gave
Wow.
me that, knowledge to know, all right, this, for whatever reason, right now, our water source is really nasty. But
You
typically,
know,
my normal TDS would be in the 250-ish range, 225, something like that. That is a normal
wha-
for my area. How
guess
about
what
you?
my TDS guess what my TDS reading is for my incoming water in Chicago.
What's that?
It's 125.
Wow. See, I would have thought there, I figured in a big city and old pipes, and that's pretty good.
I know. So if you have a chance, if you're listening to us if you're watching YouTube, hey, take the time, post a comment in there and let us
Mhm.
know what your water is,
Yeah.
if you know. And if you don't, maybe you want to find out
Yep.
because it'll help you. Uh, those pre-filters are less than they're about $10 or less
Hmm.
compared to an arrow membrane, which is a little more expensive. So changing those pre-filters will make a huge difference on your water quality. And if you don't know, maybe this is a good time to find out. So how
Yeah.
much? But in Chicago, it's about 125,
That's
even during the
great.
winter time.
That's great.
So no, we're very lucky in here. We can technically grab tap water for freshwater tanks without any
Mhm.
problems.
Wow.
It's okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's a
yeah,
shocker for me.
yeah. Yeah. So
Out.
hey, so again,
Yep.
if you know what your thing is, comment on the
Yeah.
YouTube video and let us know. We're interested to see what people say. Another thing that you can do also, Dave, is which I used to do before, is I used to have a water sensor on my water reservoir. And then the RODI unit was tied to that water sensor.
Mm.
So as soon as the water sensor became dry, the water unit would turn on. And that works perfectly fine, except that anytime the water gets used a little bit, because I'm using it for uh, replenishing evaporated water, it goes down. I have this 40-gallon trough, but if it goes down an inch, then the RODI unit turns on and it makes water.
Yeah.
And it just keeps doing that over and over and over again. And that becomes wasteful,
Right.
right?
Yep.
So having a controller going back to the hydros, having a controller, have some kind of controller
The
where it
automation.
waits until, yeah, automation. Thank you. It waits until the container is empty before it turns the RDI unit back on. It actually makes it more efficient, because the on and off is going to waste the pre-filters and the RO membrane, and also waste electricity. So wouldn't it be better if you could just wait until that container goes down and then fill it up again? That means your container is only turning on maybe once a month at
Yeah.
most. That right there is optimization. Those are
Good
the little
tip.
things that you
Yeah.
can do. Yeah, those are the little things that you can do without having to purchase a second membrane, without having to
Mhm.
purchase a booster pump. Just, try to run that unit only, not as frequently as you do right now. That would be one way of doing it.
Yeah.
So
So, I mean, I hope some of these tips were useful, and we're all trying to save money where we can in this, and also conservation, and um, you know, it, it's an expensive hobby, and wherever we can do to try and save where we can is a benefit.
absolutely. So keep those filters clean. You can find oftentimes you can find the carbon sediment filters and the DI resin at your local fish store. Support your local fish store. They're the
The
lifeline
lifeline of
of the
the
hobby,
industry. Yeah.
the industry. But if you happen to live away from a local fish store, or the fish store doesn't have the product, you can always go online. We have our store, CoralVue.com, store.coralvue.com, and we have different packs, different kits, where you have the pre-filter, the carbon, and a DI resin, and you can
Mhm.
buy that as a pack, or things like that. So we try to make it as easy as possible, but you can always hit up your favorite online retailer, and that would work as well. So thank you everybody for listening.
Yeah.
I know this wasn't as exciting, as other
It's called
shows
water.
are. It's about water.
Yeah.
but in this hobby, I think anybody that is in this hobby, there has to be a passion for the environment as well.
Yeah.
And it may not be exciting for somebody, but for us, I think anytime I can help the environment, that's something that I want to do. you know
Yeah.
so
Agreed.
thank you everybody for watching. If you are watching this the first time, don't forget, hit that bell, that subscribe button, and you'll be notified as soon as we release a new episode. If you're listening to this on podcast, you just stumble upon it, then subscribe. So then next week when we release a new podcast, you'll be notified as well. Thank you, Dave,
Nah.
for always being my co-host.
Yeah. No, thank
Wealth of
you, man.
information.
So we
Thank
keep
you so
at it.
much.
Hopefully keep
Yeah, keep at it.
educating, and hopefully people enjoy it.
Absolutely. Thank you to our listeners for putting up with us. And we will see you next time.